Welcome back to Lecture 5 on unit prices. So, what are unit prices? Unit prices are often included in bids and is a good way of negotiating the price of the units prior to award. So, example here is you might have a need for structural fill, and maybe you don't know the exact quantities, but you have a pretty good estimate from your civil engineer that you're going to need 500 cubic yards. So, you may need more, you may need less. So the best thing to do is create a unit price. And so you have to establish quantity. So you put in the bids documents 500 cubic yards. So ground rules. So there's some ground rules for unit prices. So each unit price must include a pre-established quantity, a set of numbers like lineal feet, cubic yards, tons, etc. This will help level the playing field for bidders since they're pricing the same amount. So again, back to the example of 500 cubic yards of fill, right? So if you can't give them an established quantity, you may have some difficulty getting prices. One contractor might assume 200, one contractor might assume 700, and you don't know. There may be some risks in the site. You don't, maybe you have some peat moss somewhere, and you don't know how much exactly you're going to need. You take your best guess. But in order to keep the bids close, you want to give them all the same number to price. So 500 would be a nice round number. If quantities aren't provided, contractors have no way of providing a fair unit price or apply economy of scale. So, for example, if contractors asked to price 1 square foot of a concrete sidewalk, that price may be astronomically high, like 2,000 square feet, because you just want 1 square foot. The reason B is the contractor must assume that you only required 1 square foot. Conversely, if you requested 1,000 square feet, it may be $15 a square foot. That's the economy of scale. So you need to give them a large enough quantity that it can give you reasonable pricing. Otherwise, you're going to get astronomically high prices because if you ask a contractor, what's the square foot of concrete cost? He has to assume, I need a truck and 2 guys for the day at this much an hour. I'm going to spend $2,000 for 1 square foot. So you would never do strictly square foot. Usually, you get a better price if you give a established quantity. Ground rule number two here is equitable adjustment clause. So the contract needs to include an equitable adjustment clause that applies to all unit prices. This is a percentage typically set at 10% that if the quantities fail to reach or exceed the established quantities by 10% or less, neither party will seek relief. However, if the quantities fail to reach or exceed the established quantities by more than 10%, then either party has the right to seek relief and renegotiate the unit prices. So basically, what that means is back to my 500 cubic yard example. You know that 500 cubic yards, and I'll use simple math here, was a $10 a cubic yard. So they give you $5,000 price. So if the contractor only uses, you know, within 10% under, he doesn't give you a credit back. Or if he goes over by less than 10%, he doesn't ask you for a change order. You both assume a little bit of risk. That's why the 10% is there. So we just keep it simple, stupid, because the change order process for a small amount of money isn't worth it. No one wants to go through the paperwork. So you keep it simple and agree to agree. If the if it goes over, well, then your economy of scale changes. So if all of a sudden that 500 yards turns into 1,000, the contractor's making out like a bandit because he priced at 500 yards. If he priced 1,000, his trucking cost might have been less. He might have used bigger trucks, less trips. He could place more in a day. So his unit price gets smaller. So then he's making out, which is unfair enrichment to the owner. Conversely, the other way, if all of a sudden that 500 turned into 100, well, now the contractor's losing money because he would have charged you more per yard if it was $100 a lineal foot. So he's losing money. So that's the reason why you if it's 10 or less, plus or minus 10 or less, I should say, you just kind of agree to agree. If it goes over that, then you have the right to renegotiate the unit price. So if an equitable adjustment clause is not provided, then both parties have different opinions on what is fair. This would create a situation called unjust enrichment. That's a legal term you might see in some claims, which is when one party receives a benefit at the expense of the other without reasonable compensation. Basically means the owner made out, he got a much better deal than the contractor lost money. So to keep things fair, you have to have some type of equitable adjustment clause.